A lonely girl walks along a snowy path along the forest. She marvels at the beauty of today's weather. The main character's name is Yoon-ju, but her close friends just call her Jae. She's a regular girl who just graduated from college. Suddenly, a squirrel climbs onto her shoulder. She admires her cuteness, too, and remembers her bunny she once had. Jae says her pet was sick with every disease imaginable, and then she didn't know what to do with him. One day, the girl took the rabbit to the emergency room, and while she was waiting for the results, she realized that she had been wearing only one shoe the whole time. The protagonist says his asthma could have been cured by a pristine place like this forest. Jay decides to shake his head off the unnecessary thoughts and continue on his way. But suddenly the explorer's attention is drawn to a large palace that stands in the middle of the forest. She admits she has a poor knowledge of local destinations and isn't sure she can get there in time. Meanwhile, in an ancient palace, in a dimly lit study, a certain young man, expensively and handsomely dressed, sits behind a desk. His servant comes up to him and says in a trembling voice that she has brought the gentleman some tea. But at that moment, the cup and tray falls from the servant's hands, which causes her great regret. The girl shamefully apologizes to her master, who has so far paid no attention to her. The young gentleman is very busy with the business at the table, from which it seems as if he does not hear the delinquent girl. Suddenly, a bearded man of age enters the office. He asks His Grace to pay attention to him. The bearded man noticed and squinted at the servant crying over a broken teacup. Then the man notifies the gentleman that a certain guest from the land is asking to see him. These words cause the lord to be distracted. This news, which is not the first time it has come to him, angers the man, and he says he should have hung a few more heads. Gritting his teeth, he makes a promise that if the visitor is another liar, he will immediately chop off his head. At this time, in the courtyard at the lord's domain, two guards looking at the hanging corpses are surprised at the number of decapitated guests this year. Suddenly they notice the main character that came to them, having exhausted all her strength. The guards are startled by the sudden appearance of the man and try to figure out who has come to see them. Noticing Yoon-ju's strange clothes, they decide that the girl doesn't look like them and compare her to an alien. Jay, as if nothing had happened, sweetly greets one of the guards as he nervously asks her to introduce herself. The protagonist notices that there's nothing special about her to introduce herself and asks the guard first to tell her if this place is the Duke of Landgale's castle. Thoth says she did, whereupon Jay is relieved that she came from the land to meet the Duke in person. Speaking of Ludwig Landgale, the guards are surprised that after becoming Duke, it took him only 8 years to become ruler of the entire North. They had heard of the indifference and cruelty of the Lord. His mere presence is enough to horrify. The guard assures me that the Lord has demon blood in him, and her partner says that despite all the aloofness, the Duke has strange predilections. As an example, the guy brings his nasty habit of opening the gate to anyone who introduces himself as a visitor from the ground. Mentioning certain guests from Earth, the girl says that they always have strange outfits and appearances. Her partner agrees, saying it's been 500 years since an Earthling was last seen in this world, and it's just a legend now. But even knowing that death awaited them in the Duke's castle, the guests from Earth did not give up trying to get there. The man says it used to happen once every 4 or 5 years, and almost everyone was hanged. But now the last visitor from Earth came less than a month ago. The girl is surprised by the Duke's cruelty, after which she assumes that the protagonist who has arrived is also certain to suffer the same fate. Pounding his fist loudly on the table, Duke Ludwig asks the servant to repeat what he said. The bearded man repeats that the guest who came in called herself Jay from planet Earth, after which he described her as a young girl of short stature. Suddenly the Duke, ignoring the servant's words, burst from the room, begging to himself that the long-awaited meeting should now be fulfilled. Ludwig ran past all the employees into the hallway, leaving them in slight confusion. Yoon-ju, meanwhile, sits at the lavish table waiting. She recalls taking a pillow with Manpanji Bob with her. The girl recalls that Manpanji Bob is a character her boy adores. His view of this character was always full of admiration. She admits that looking at the boy became so obsessed with her doggy that she got a slap on the neck from a certain K for deflating merch on the character. Looking at the pillow, Jay is mortified with his pup and admits he wants to see him sooner rather than later. Suddenly, she notices that in such a strange place she finds herself in, her phone is still working and the notifications keep coming. Yoonju suggests that there is no Wi-Fi or satellites in this world, as if it were not another world, but a museum of European medieval culture. Remembering a department head named K, the girl is glad he kept at least one of his promises, calling him a jerk. Jay then turns up the music on his headphones, starting to dance and hum the lyrics. But suddenly the protagonist stops her fun, reasoning that now she will see him after many years and she needs to be serious. At this time, the Duke of Landgale is approaching the entrance to the hall in which his guest is seated. He looks forward to the meeting. The man entered the hall, crossing his gaze with the girl. After a brief silence, she clarifies if the gentleman in front of her is Duke Landgale. There is again an awkward silence between the pair, after which the man confirms that it is him. Jay smiles sweetly, then asks the next question. What was Manponji Bob secretly doing in the store when he was filling in for the supervisor? Ludwig replies that Manponji Bob ate a sweet burger, while Yoonju, noticing his excitement, laughs it off. Then the girl asks the guy one last question, where she last bought him ice cream. Duke replies that it happened at the Silvermine Market. Once her friend answered all the questions correctly, the protagonist spread her arms for a hug with a wide smile, beckoning her asshole over to her. Ludwig gladly joins her in her embrace, glad to himself that Jay hasn't abandoned him. Time is transported back in time where a family of 4 is traveling down the road in a heavy snowfall. But the driver loses control, causing the car to go off the road and crash. The protagonist's entire family is dead. The girl admits that every day of her life before meeting Ludwig was a nightmare because her whole family died in a car accident. There were no relatives to take in the orphan child, leaving Jay all alone. Due to her intense feelings of guilt and loss, Yoonju did something she shouldn't have. After swallowing pills, she loses consciousness. After a while, Jay wakes up in the hospital. She pulled herself up and looked around while tears welled up in her eyes again. The girl is approached by a blonde-haired man in whom she recognizes her uncle. He admits he was worried about her and is glad she woke up. The protagonist does not hold back her tears and hugs her uncle. The man calms her down and suggests she go home. Already being at home, Jay observes her uncle doing all the cleaning and advises her niece to rest. Yoonju is surprised at how thrifty her relative has become, remembering his past gangster image. The girl tells her uncle that she has already finished college, so she's going to look for a job, with which he advises her not to hurry. The man asks if his niece has a job in mind, to which she says that she does not, and she wants to find a job in her specialty. Hearing her wish, her uncle thinks a little and pleases the girl by saying that he knows a good firm that she might like, to which she replies interestedly. On the advice of her uncle, Jay came to the office to apply for a job, where she is already greeted by her boss named Kay. The girl smiles at him welcomingly and says she is very happy to meet him. Kay says they don't have a separate office, but work on a full-time basis, and that her profession is something akin to foster care. He adds that usually people who are unmarried and suitably qualified cannot take on guardianship. When the superiors decide to end the work, a notification will come to Yoonji's phone, after which 3 days are allocated for goodbye. The man says the average job is 5 years, and it's the same as raising a child. He advises against treating work as a job responsibility. The girl didn't seem to be listening to him at all. Her face flushed when she saw that Mr. K was smiling more than he looked. Approaching the little young man, the boss says that if the protagonist gives him lots of love, that his scarred soul will get a chance at a second life. He introduces Yoon-ji to a young lord named Ludwig Landgale that came from another world, the Kronos Empire. He will be her pupil from this day forward. The girl marvels at the boy's beauty and compares him to an angel, while Kay says that the child understands speech but cannot write in their own language. The protagonist sits down in front of the boy and, after wanting to introduce herself by her official name, decides to call herself Jay. Speaking of this memory, she admits that she remembers well how they met. As she looked at the child, her soul glowed, and the bad things from her memory vanished. Little Ludwig Landgul became her mischievous puppy who gave her life meaning. And now, after all these years cuddling with him, Jay promises that if one day they break up, she will find him again and never let him go again. For then, when he became her child, along with the boy, she too was healed. While walking home with the baby, the girl notices Ludwig's clothes and thinks they look strange and stand out too much. Already at home, Jay decides to try on some girly clothes on the young gentleman. She admires every image of him in his dress, but the boy doesn't like it and pulls off his clothes. At that moment, the girl saw the distinctive gender marker, by which it is clear that the child in front of her is not a girl, as she wanted. She says she can't believe her eyes, because Ludwig looks like a beautiful girl and suggests that there are no clothes that fit him. Suddenly, at that moment, the child starts coughing violently, and the protagonist rushes to his aid. After touching Ludwig's head, Yunju notices he has a high fever and gets scared that it might be a fever. In that instant, an episode with her dead younger brother, who cried in the same way when he was hungry, came to her mind. Then the girl would reassure him and promise to solve the problem, which she is doing now with the young gentleman. She can guarantee his complete safety. The young mother put the baby to bed by placing a cold, wet towel on his hot forehead. While the baby slept, Jay decided to make him a meal. She wanted to taste the dish, but she spit the nasty stuff out. After a few tries, she manages to get a tasty meal, after which she asks Ludwig to eat to build up her energy. She wanted to feed the boy as she suddenly became nervous when she saw the painful swelling on his neck. The girl immediately recalls Kay's words that her job is to help the boy's wounded soul and heal it, to bring it safely back to its place. Jay apologizes to the young lord, though she herself doesn't understand how he got such wounds. Time goes back in time, back to Ludwig's memories. In them, a woman with incredible anger on her face is choking him. Unable to bear it any longer, the boy begs his mother to stop, because at this rate, she will really strangle him. The woman lets the child go, but slaps him hard and tells him he dare not call her Mommy. The next words make the boy even sadder. His mother calls him a devil's spawn and says she doesn't understand how she could give birth to something so disgusting. The mother then listens to the man say that her son is weak, but has good mental abilities. He learns much faster than his peers. The mother, however, with a striking equanimity on her face, says that it has no relevance to her, after which she walks away from her interlocutor. But the man keeps saying it would be a loss not to give her child the opportunity to learn in the outside world. But the woman ignores his words and leaves the room without a word. Ludwig's next recollection tells us that he was fed on the scraps that were thrown into his room. He cried a lot about not getting enough love and having to eat like an animal. Suddenly, the boy wakes up. The bandage on his forehead comes off, and he seems to be getting better. He notices his new mom, who has fallen asleep next to him, holding his hand. Her warmth and care surprise and endear her to Ludwig, to whom so few people have ever treated him before. After a short time, Jay wakes up, but her baby is still asleep. She revels in the beauty of the sleeping young gentleman, after which she quietly gets out of bed without waking the baby. As she begins to scrub the floors, the girl recalls yesterday, in which she was badly frightened by the boy's fever. She also recalls that upon arriving home, Ludwig vomited violently. She concludes that he has a weak body. At the same time, she notices that this is the first time she has ever cleaned so diligently. She is proud of herself that the apartment sparkles after her cleaning. She then prepares the boy's breakfast, but notices that he is still asleep. She decides to get closer to him and make sure he's not awake yet. But at that moment, Ludwig suddenly opens his eyes, and Jay, thinking she accidentally woke him up, apologizes. She then offers the boy breakfast since he's already awake, to which he shakes his head negatively. Suddenly, the boy struggles to pronounce his new guardian's name. Yunju is happy about this and helps him spell out the word Jay. She says the boy can call for her anytime. Jay cringes again at Ludwig's cuteness, then suddenly realizes she said it out loud. The girl and boy exchange some more tenderness where they took turns calling each other by name. After that, the protagonist asked the child to wait a little while she served him the dish. But she saw Ludwig's interest in apples, which gave him one idea, which she immediately pursues. After throwing a sheet over herself, she begins to play the dreaded wicked witch that ominously suggests the prince eat an apple. But her performance spirals out of control when the boy's brain, instead of a simple game, sees his mom in front of him, who wishes a quick death for him. Ludwig is frightened by this vision. He cries out loudly and covers his face with his hands. Not expecting such a reaction, Jay tries to calm the child, but all her attempts are futile. She admits that the witch came out too scary and apologizes. It doesn't work. And then she has another plan. She's off to get the right stuff. A few seconds later, Ludwig watches a different performance as Jay plays a game where Manhwa the toy and the owner of the doggy goodie store get to know each other. It helps normalize the boy's condition. The two toys say they have come to befriend the prince, but start an argument about who will do it first. In a heated argument, Manhwa proves that of the two of them, he is the boss because he is the cute doggy, and the other one is just a piece of sponge. The doggy toy wins, whereupon Jay says he deserves a hug, which Ludwig does to Manhwa. Having finished the play, the girl once again apologizes to the child and says that from now on, she and the dog will protect him from any misfortune. A few weeks go by. Yunju engages in a game with the child in which he has to name the objects that are drawn on the cards. Ludwig successfully completes the task, which causes a wave of enthusiastic emotions in the girl. She then asks the boy to name the objects on the cards himself, which the boy also does well. Jay is proud of his child for not only being handsome, but also smart. She's thinking he might end up in an organization for people with high intelligence. But noticing Ludwig's stiffness, the girl realizes that they have been together for weeks. But he is still unable to open up to her. At that moment, she gets a good idea and tells the boy that they can take a break from studying together now. She cheerfully presents the child with a cutlet in the shape of a puppy and suggests they cook them now. Ludwig shows his pupil a dog on a stick that he made himself. Jay praises him and offers to fry a treat. After cooking the cutlet that her child made, the protagonist came to marvel at its wonderful flavor. She suggests that Ludwig try it too. The one takes a bite and is also fascinated by the flavor of the dish. The girl praises him once more, after which she kisses him on the cheek. She says he needs to excel at loving his loved ones in addition to succeeding academically. The boy fell into a little wonderment when he felt a smack on his cheek. Yunju, on the other hand, says it's his turn to kiss her. Ludwig was embarrassed to do so, so Jay kissed him again to keep him relaxed. Yet, overcoming his indecision, the young gentleman kisses his guardian, which makes the girl very proud. A few months flew by quickly. The couple did a lot of cooking together, shopping and traveling for errands. Yunju steps her foot on a small piece of the constructor, which causes her uncomfortable pain. She complains that she has asked Ludwig many times to put away his toys, but he does whatever he wants, as if he were at home. But the girl dyes her anger when she notices her sleeping baby. She realizes that children are as they should be. Meanwhile, outside, there's a car parked outside the house. In it sits the main character's uncle, who is waiting for his niece. But she doesn't show up for a long time, so he asks a boy named Jean, who is sitting in the back seat, to wait a bit. After a while, Jay ends up with his uncle in the car. She listens to Jean yell at her, who is not happy that she made him wait because of some kid. The protagonist can't stand such rude behavior and wriggles her hands in the boy's face. She thinks it would be a good idea to rinse his filthy mouth out. But they have to stop pampering when the man asks them to stop because doing it in a moving car is dangerous. Turning to his uncle, Yunju is surprised that even after a year, Jin still behaves so brazenly. The girl says that he has completely spoiled the child, to which he only laughs. Jin is the prince of the Khan continent. He's from another dimension, cared for by the protagonist's uncle. This child was rude and unadaptable from the very beginning, which made it difficult for even his uncle, who was already experienced in raising children, to deal with him. Because of his uncontrollable behavior, Jay even compares raising Jean to training a wild animal. She glances at Ludwig, who is sitting in the back seat. The girl thinks he and Jean are complete opposites, which makes her proud of him. After the car arrived at its destination, all the passengers went outside. The main character admires the beautiful color of the sky. At the same moment, she remembers that on sunny days, the ultraviolet rays increase, for which she asks Ludwig to put on a hat. Chief K walks up to the newcomers and, without too many greetings, says that the reason he has gathered them here is to teach the children about farming and learning about nature. Jay tells his boy that they're going to have a lot of fun now, and they're going to have a lot of fun, which pleases Ludwig too. Jin, observing such a warm relationship between a girl and a child, disgustedly wrinkled his face and called farming a boring occupation. As he gets to work, the young prince finds a tomato, which he decides to surprise his female pupil with. She admires and praises him. But Jean is not pleased to hear this and says that to mess around with just one tomato for such a large amount of time is just ludicrous. Jay isn't happy with Jean's displeasure, and she advises him not to snipe, since he hasn't put anything together himself yet. But Kay intervenes in their quarrel. He asks them to stop and not to slack off anymore. The two are forced to agree with him. At this moment, the guys are beckoned over by Uncle Yunju, who has already prepared the food. He asks everyone to wash their hands first. The girl and Ludwig came to the faucet to clean their hands, but Jean, who happened to be next to them, didn't like something again. He splashed water on the boy and the girl, but it was Jay, whose t-shirt was soaked through, who suffered the most from his antics. The protagonist and Jin start fighting again. Yoon-ju complains that now Ludwig might catch a cold because of him. Kay, who was also washing his hands, noticed another coupling of girl and child, which again needs to be stopped. But his face flushed when he saw something clinging in Yoon-ju, who was soaked to the skin. He turned away and only said quietly that the protagonist could use a little more caution herself. Being already at the dinner table, the girl thanks her uncle for the delicious food. She then asks Ludwig to be more careful and let her know if he gets cold, because she is worried about what happened earlier. Jean is once again annoyed by this, and he assures the young gentleman that the water didn't get on him at all and that he won't be harmed by it. The girl grabs the bully's cheeks again and begins to wry his face, warning him that if he pounces that she will punish him right now. Jean says she wouldn't dare repeat the threats by looking into his eyes, to which she says she'd love to do it, because she thinks the color of his eyes is beautiful. Not expecting a compliment in her address, the little pest was surprised, then backed away from the girl, calling her shameless. As night fell, Ludwig was already asleep on Jay's lap, while she and Jean continued to argue about various things. But that didn't stop it from creating the warm family atmosphere they ended their day with. An indeterminate amount of time passes. Jay and Warden K have a conversation while in a haunting interrogation atmosphere. The boss covers his face with his hands and expresses that her words are insane, even though he can't interfere in her affairs. The girl repeats with a look of utmost seriousness on her face that this matter concerns only her and Ludwig, and the boss has nothing to worry about. But Kay defends her opinion. He says she shouldn't ignore what he says. Ludwig, that he was waiting for his pupil in the corridor of the hospital, began to worry that she was delayed. Jay, on the other hand, tells her boss that she can't back down and wants her child to take growth pills from the Eastern Ginkgo Clinic. Kay says it's crazy to spend over $1,000,000 on such a useless thing. The girl, on the other hand, believes that it is not a useless thing at all, and her interlocutor simply underestimates the problem. She explains that in 3 years, Ludwig has grown only 5 centimeters, and he is already quite a bit shorter than his female peers. This can be a problem when he gets teased at school for being short. Kay is tired of hearing Yoonju's worries about getting complexes. She also says that $1,000,001 for pills is nothing to her. Touching on the subject of finances, Kay decides to say something that will comfort the protagonist. If you don't count the extra expenses, her business is doing well. After talking to Kay, Jay came out to her baby. She is very happy that he is healthy, but the boy, who doesn't know anything yet, wonders if everything is okay. She hugs the baby and says he's fine, and she's proud of him, then offers to go to the store to get food for the party. At the store, they are greeted with a saleswoman who comes to marvel at the boy's beauty. Afterward, she offers the young gentleman to take from her a bun she has made herself. Ludwig gladly accepts the gift from her. The prince, in a cute smile, thanks the saleswoman for the treat, which makes the aunt very happy, after which the girl and the child leave the store. While eating scones outside, Jay noticed that it was snowing and suggested that the child play snowballs. But the man was not happy about such an undertaking. The boy didn't even utter a single word. But Yoonju doesn't give up, and warmly taking Ludwig's hand, suggested that he mold a friend out of a snowman. This idea interested the prince more. The couple took some effort to mold a snowman in the shape of Mungpanji. Jay then asks the boy if he's feeling scared now, to which he says he's fine now. After a while, the girl and the baby were at home. They were in the company of Uncle and Jean celebrating Christmas. The family had a fun time giving each other Christmas gifts. Watching her sleeping baby, Yoonju realizes that it's been 3 years since Ludwig came into her life and cleared the darkness of her soul with his light. But in that instant, a message arrives on the protagonist's phone that there are 72 hours left before the deadline. The measurement control assistant asks the girl to report to the head of the department by the end of the day. Sadly looking at the scenery outside the bus window, the girl realizes that sooner or later this moment was going to scare her. But she hesitates with the question of whether she can let go of a child she has managed to love dearly for 3 years. Jay doesn't want her baby boy to return to the family where his fragile soul was tormented. She is certain that even if she is dismissed from her position, she cannot leave Ludwig alone. The protagonist once again finds herself at the same table with her boss, Key. She firmly expresses her unwillingness to let the boy go. In response, Kay asks him to recall what he said the first time they met. The average time of work is 5 years. The longest time is 20. And the shortest time is 1 year. The boss then asks about whether the girl remembers his words about Ludwig having a wounded soul. Jay responds in the affirmative. The man then says that this child is the soul, and that it is not just some expression. It's about a real soul. Yoonju says she doesn't believe his words, and cites proof that he's not a ghost. She can touch him, talk to him. But Kay starts talking about how the company they belong to is an interdimensional organization, and its work is a big secret. Only heads of state know about this company, and this secrecy is due to the fact that they are doing the work at the behest of God. To the girl, his words seem fantastic. She interrogates him to see if he means a real God, or if it's just a metaphor. But the chief says that all changes are connected, and each is in balance under the care of God. However, because an infinite number of lives come and go, there are occasionally cracks in the balance of measurements. Kay argues that all dimensions are tightly intertwined, and if one is damaged, the balance is disturbed everywhere else. But God figured out how to solve the problem. In the dimension where there was the most diversity, they created an interdimensional agency aligned with the government. The chief concludes by saying that this is how the institution to which they belong was created. Jay concludes from the man's words that Ludwig is a crack in the dimension, and the gods sent him to Earth to restore balance. Kay, on the other hand, claims that the boy is not a rift. But if he disappears from his native dimension, it will cause a rift in their dimension. He reiterates that he speaks of Ludwig as a soul, for his real body has remained in the Kronos Empire all this time. The boy's family has been passing down divine power for generations, which isn't stable until adulthood, but they can live without a soul for years with only a fraction of it. But when the limit comes, the soul must return to the original body, otherwise there is danger of destroying both body and soul. Hearing those words, Jay was confused. Realizing that time is running out and his soul may not return to his body, she decides to act. She holds out hope of asking her boss if there is a way to solve this problem without sending Ludwig there, to which he remains silent. The girl then insists that she doesn't want to condemn Ludwig to suffering and asks Kay to let her meet with the god to talk to him. The man at first assured that it was impossible, but then said he had one way. But the protagonist no longer heard his words. She's crying because she doesn't want to send her child to a place where he'll be unwell. She desperately asks Kay if he ever meets the god of dimensions, to learn from him at least something to solve her problem. Then the girl realizes that all this time she has been soaping mistakenly. It is not Ludwig who cannot live without her, but she without him. Time passes. Jay, being in her home, eats a meal with her thoughts hovering in no clear place. Her sadness is noticed by Ludwig, and he wonders if she's okay and if she likes the food. The girl immediately portrays herself as cheerful and says she's fine and really likes the dish. Yoonju then started to wash the dishes, but a boy came to help her. She decided he was doing fine without her, so she went to get the bathroom ready. But after distancing herself from Ludwig and looking at him from the outside, Jay became frustrated, seeing no signs of a happy child in him. After a while, the couple had fun in the bathtub. The boy splashed the protagonist and offered her a bath too, to which the latter, laughing, refused. Suddenly, Jay decides to remind the young gentleman that she has said more than once that she loves him more than anyone else in the world. The boy rejoices at her words and also says that he loves her more than anyone else in the world. The girl hugs Ludwig and asks him to remember that she will always love him. The young prince also says that he loves his ward and will always be there for her. Ta is very happy to hear him say that. But suddenly their fun is interrupted by a call received on the phone of the main character. The man on the other side of the tube reminds her of her imminent separation from her child. The whole time, the girl was being watched by a boy who can't wait to find out what she was told on the phone. After hanging up the phone, Jay decides to tell Ludwig that they will have to break up soon. This news triggered a wave of negative emotions in the toddler. He clung tearfully to his guardian, begging not to leave him. He thinks she's dumping him because he doesn't like eating carrots, so he desperately makes Jay promise to eat only healthy food. He quickly brought carrots from the kitchen and showed the girl how good he was at eating them. The boy asks again not to leave him, but Yunju stops him with a hug and says that's not the point and he didn't do anything wrong. She explains that if Ludwig doesn't come back, his body will be in a lot of pain, so she will go with him. The young prince doesn't believe her words, to which Jay promises to go with him. They know that Jay will always love Ludwig, and Ludwig will always love Jay. In a warm atmosphere, the protagonist and her uncle, with no one else around, have a conversation around the table. The man expresses the opinion that the time has not yet come for such an event, and he regrets that it has come to this. The girl agrees with him, but says that she and the boy promise to meet each other one day. He doesn't understand her words, whereupon Jay explains that it's all so they can see each other again, and reminds her uncle of his promise to send her to that world. The man agrees with her. At this time, Ludwig decides to have a talk before he leaves with his friend Jean. Jean, without an expression of sadness on his face, says he's glad he's leaving. Unlike his friend, Ludwig does not respond to him with rudeness, but smilingly agrees. Jean, on the other hand, continues his opera about how he's glad to say goodbye to Ludwig, since he won't have to see his nasty face anymore. But the young prince, without stopping to smile, claps his palm on his friend's head and tells him to obey and behave. Jean didn't like this move either, allegedly for not washing his dirty hands. However, looking at the sad expression on Ludwig's face, Jin hurriedly walked away from him, anticipating a sad moment that he wouldn't like. Afterward, Jay and the young gentleman looked into the store of a saleswoman he knew, but the girl noticed that Ludwig, after saying hello to the woman, was once again a prisoner of his depressing thoughts. She decides to cheer him up with a pork bar, which the boy likes. She then kisses the baby on the forehead and tells him that she loves him very much and promises that they will meet soon and everything will be fine. Ludwig did not smile at her words, but he too said that he loved his ward very much. Expecting the transition from one world to another any minute now, Warden K asks the young gentleman to sit and wait. Jay tries to comfort the boy by promising to come to him in the other world, but Ludwig is still in tears. The baby does not give up hope to ask the girl not to leave him, to which she says that soon she will be by his side. For K, the time for their goodbye is over, so he takes the girl away from the baby. Ta asks not to do that, because they haven't agreed yet. Ludwig, watching his pupil leave the room, startles and calls Jay back. He wanted to run after the main character, but he accidentally tripped and fell painfully to the floor. Seeing this, Jay asked to be let back to the baby because he was hurting and needed her help. But the door to the room had already closed. Ludwig, drenching himself in tears, watched the closed door behind which a man close to him remained. Time passes. The protagonist, in the course of a conversation with her boss Kay, asks him to help her get to the other world as he promised. But Kay, who was already tired of the girl's demanding behavior, sighed heavily. Jay, who thought the man was smirking at her, flares up with anger and yells at him that her situation is not funny in any way, and calls the man a liar. The girl once again orders that she be taken to the god, threatening to keep screaming. It's starting to get on the boss's nerves. As soon as Yoonju fell silent, the man voiced a sensational surprise. He is the god she so desperately needs. There was an awkward silence between them, in which Jae questioned the man about his words, to which he once again confirmed everything. Suddenly, the girl grabs the man by the collar and yells at him again for hiding the truth all this time. She orders Kay to help her go to the other world again, and since he is a god, she asks him to do it right now. The supervisor asks the girl to calm down and listen. Adjusting his collar, he says there's a reason he can't send it right now. Jae had calmed down a bit, but still, frowning her eyebrows, wondering what the reason was. The man sighs again. Kay explains that it can't be done right now. Though her soul is being pulled along by Ludwig's soul, there are other souls that don't want to let Jae go. Hearing about the souls who wouldn't let her go from this world, the girl's eyes took on a pleasant glint. The warden says that's the reason you can't move between dimensions. And he also adds that those who are pulling the protagonist's soul the hardest should either be made to let go or cut all ties with them so that they forget about her. Jae pondered the souls that were pulling hard for her and realized that she only knew one such. Uncle Yoonji happily welcomes his niece who has come to visit him, but in response, the girl only smiled modestly and immediately admitted that she had a conversation to have with him. After discussing everything over a cup of tea, the uncle realized that his niece couldn't go to another dimension because of him. But Jae cheerfully assures him that it's not that bad and asks the man not to make such a sad face. But the very next moment, her smile is gone, and she asks her uncle to forgive her. Suddenly, the girl hears words that warm her heart. Her uncle says that she is his most favorite niece, and he is proud of her. He admits that ever since his carefree and intelligent niece was born, he has looked at her and remembered her mom. Uncle says that when the main character's mom and her are sad, they make the same decisions, which is very hilarious to him. From what he says, he concludes that even if Jae goes to another world, she will still be a precious niece to him. Yoonju, who is in tears, thanks her uncle for such precious support. While the man asked his niece not to start sobbing, Jae thought about how much he cared about her and that all this time she hadn't been unwanted by anyone. At this point, his 5 kopecks is inserted by Jean, who does not understand how one can cry on such an occasion and asks the girl to stop. But Jae instantly threatened him with a fist, causing him to run out the door. Uncle, on the other hand, assumes that this child, though boorish, is also sad. Jean, on the other hand, reflects that when Ludwig returns home and his power is stronger, Jae will be nothing but fun for him, which will quickly become boring. Realizing this, he becomes incomprehensible to the joy of the protagonist, who herself does not suspect anything. Looking at the mountain of boxes of stuff, Jae tells Kay that there are fewer boxes for the trip than she expected. She consults with the man about taking more boxes, to which he says that it is impossible because she will not carry them all away. But Jae began to complain that it wasn't enough for her, while her boss began to argue with her about the necessity of the toys she was taking with her. Kay went through the main character's boxes and threw out what he thought was superfluous: toys with Manpanji. After sifting through all the unnecessary junk, the boss came out with a mallow bag that he considers the most compact for traveling. However, the girl, seeing a compass, dry shampoo, and toothbrush in the bag, complained that she could not live with such a set of things. The main character has raised a scream again because she's going to a terrible place, and the boss won't even let her take a pillow. She hasn't forgotten about Kay's deception, so she orders him to help her. The man, who realized that at this rate Jae would lead him to his grave, came up with the perfect way out for her. He lends her a certain bag. Though it looks no different from any other bag, it is endowed with the power to hold anything. The boss allowed Yoonju to experiment with her. The girl was delighted when she pulled a whole bunch of balloons out of that bag. Jae thanks Kay's supervisor for such a thing. She's glad she can now take all the things she needs with her, but the latter suddenly changes the subject. He warns that Ludwig Langel is a very strong boy and thinks it's not worth worrying about him. There's an explanation for his words. While Ludwig's soul was healed in this world, in the other his body was changed to a mature state. And he, realizing that he would have to leave this world after healing, kept the appearance of the soul the same as it had been when they first met. At that moment, the protagonist realized why her child remained so small. She didn't even realize it and worried in vain. The girl is glad that her worries were false and that Ludwig is completely healthy. Warden K reiterates that the young gentleman there has reached puberty and says that it is only because of Jay that he has been able to become so strong and healthy. The man also admits to being such a young and capable worker and expresses his hope to meet Yoon-ju with an even healthier body and soul. The woman smiled back at the man and told him that he had no need to worry about her. Afterward, Kay's boss proceeded to help the girl put things in her bag while she asked him to do it more carefully. After a while, the protagonist also came to her uncle's house to talk before leaving. Toth asks about whether he can reach his niece. Jay says that of course he can do that, since she wants to keep in touch with him too. Remembering the rules about holding showers, the uncle is surprised by the girl's words and wonders how she managed to do it. Jay immediately says the words she blackmailed Kay with: if he doesn't do as she wants, she'll curse his hair and it will irrevocably fall out. This sinister image of his niece moved his uncle to tears, while Jean remained unemotional. He says it's all a dumb idea. The protagonist jokingly began threatening the child that he might be the first to try out her witchcraft skills on himself. At this time, Chief K, gazing out the panoramic window at the night city, was thinking of his own. The moment with Jay, who sternly asks him to do the exchange rate calculation correctly so as not to even count by 10-1, came to his mind. He then recalls other moments with her. How she cried, how they spent time together after farming day, and how they first met. The man smirked, then remarked aloud that Yoon-do was a very interesting girl. Before finally leaving for the road, Jay tells her uncle not to worry about her and to watch her health, to which he agrees. They hug and make promises to each other to get in touch more often. The uncle also advises his niece to be careful. Jean is told by the girl to stay strong, behave, and obey his guardian. The boy tells her not to worry about it, because he made a promise that he would be responsible until the day he died. The girl hugs Jean and is happy to see how much he has grown up. She promises to see him soon, to which the boy sadly agrees. Jay waves goodbye to her relatives and promises to contact them as soon as she and Ludwig meet. After the niece left, the uncle, noticing the child's changed mood, asked him if everything was all right. He just turned away and said he was fine, though he was probably worried about something. Finding herself already in Kay's interdimensional facility, Jay hears from him that her clothes are too unusual for another world, and she may be attacked. Because of this, the warden says he will try to move the girl as close to the castle as possible, and so that there are no people in her way. Yoon-ju agrees with what he says and says that if she gets lost, she'll just turn on the navigator. The boss tells her that when she meets with Ludwig, she will only be able to ask him 3 questions that he and she understand. And on the way to his castle, she can only ask 1 question about his location. He warns that once they meet, they must quickly exchange questions and answers, or it could lead to trouble. The girl memorizes that she has only 3 questions and consequently 3 answers, then tells the supervisor that she has it all figured out. However, Kay informs the protagonist about one more important condition. Her soul must be absolutely pure. This is because people who harbor greed and envy become prisoners of their own greed and make others suffer. As the god Kay says that his child, that once was pure of soul, was once a victim of this cruelty. And no matter how much it tormented the god's soul, there was no way he could interfere with his fate personally. And the moment he decided to save the child, he entrusted Ludwig to the protagonist. Kay's boss says that the girl saved the boy's soul through sincere love. He also says that Jay told him the words he needed most, and in gratitude for that, he promises to do anything to help her. At the end, the boss thanks Yoon-ju for giving love to this child, to which she also responds with gratitude. Kay then apologizes to her for not telling her a lot of things and deceiving her, causing a lot of problems for the childminder. In response, Jay makes the suggestion that there's probably still something that the boss has kept from her, saying that it's not too late for him to go with her. After exchanging pleasantries, the girl takes a seat on a luxurious throne that is about to send her to another world. Kay asks her to close her eyes, which Jay does. She's excited to meet Ludwig. Time travels back in time. The wedding of Ludwig's parents is taking place. The couple performs the marriage ceremony, with everyone in the audience cheerfully applauding. The first to make his vow to support and love each other as a married couple is the man. Then the vows are offered to the bride, but she is not in a hurry with her answer. In reality, Ludwig's mom doesn't like everything that's going on. She psychopathically doesn't want to get married. The girl hates her fiancé so much that every time in her thoughts she asks him not to come near her. Otherwise, she will straighten him out. Ludwig's mom often cried at what her life had become. She didn't want to live like this. The reason for this depression was the love that broke down when she married the father of her child. But her depression took an even more terrible turn when the girl found out that she got pregnant by an unloved man. Ludwig, who had just been born, was admired for his beauty by all the servants. But his mother didn't care about that at all. She was so angry that she was about to take her own son from the servant and throw him to the floor. Luckily, there was a father who did not allow the girl to abuse his only heir. He handed the child back to the servant. He told his wife he didn't need her anymore and could leave. These words only added fuel to the fire of the mother, who was gradually going mad. Because Mr. Landgale only wanted her for an heir, she took out all her anger on her son. Staying in exile for his mother, Ludwig suddenly realized that he had been locked in his room for months. He noticed a bird flying by in the window and wondered fleetingly what it would be like to be as free as she was, as suddenly a divine silhouette appears before his eyes, taking pity on him out of his misery. God says that he has come to help the boy since he is of the Landgale family. However, the silhouette says his power isn't enough for that, so he gives Ludwig a chance and promises to send him to someone who will truly love him. The young prince, gazing into the divine essence, became greatly interested in his words about sincere love. The Duke of Landgale, finding his heir unconscious on the floor, asks the doctor what the cause is. The doctor says it seems to be a hereditary disease passed down in their lineage. The father asks his son to wake up, for he cannot bear his wife's suicide and his death at the same time. He desperately says that from now on, God does not exist for him. Ludwig, choking back tears, asks God if anyone can really love him after everyone has turned their backs on him. Thoth says he will find a man he is sure of, and who will love the boy more than anything and teach his soul to love. Lastly, the deity commands Ludwig to never doubt whether or not he is worthy of love. Ludwig, who had lived 2 years on Earth, woke up in a large castle at the age of 18. He awakened when his divine power that minimized his physical pain to a minimum became unnecessary. But Ludwig isn't thanking God for that, since he doesn't have Jay by his side now. Guy reflects that if he had continued to know the warmth of affection and love, life without Jay wouldn't have been so unbearable. But Ludwig is relieved that he at least has memories with her. That's the only reason he keeps breathing. Walking down the long hallway, the man recalls the girl's words about how much she loves him and with what he mentally reciprocates. But suddenly, a soul appears near the guy who says that now he has become worthless to no one, not even his own mother, and the whole world has turned away from him. Ludwig slams his fist hard against the wall and orders the soul to disappear away. His strange behavior is noticed by the butler, and he asks the gentleman if he is all right. Thoth says he does, and asks not to worry about him. However, the man guessed that the prince had been visited by a ghost again. He informs Ludwig that a letter from the emperor has arrived. In the letter, the emperor worries that Ludwig has not yet married and has no heirs, so he proposes to arrange a matchmaking party. However, the emperor does not insist, and before it is too late, he allows the prince to make his own choice and reminds him that because of the peculiarities of the Landgale family, Ludwig must marry a girl of lower status. Ludwig crumples up the letter and says that the only thing he cares about is the Gusnin, the defender of the empire. He says it's just another pathetic scheme by the dastardly emperor. But because of the need to leave heirs, he will be forced to repeat his father's fate. And in that case, the aristocrat who married him would repeat his mother's tragic fate. The piling up of problems gave Ludwig a headache. He covers his face with his hand and bows out loud. But at that moment, a sinister thought crosses his mind that will put him out of his misery. Just kill everyone. The prince is distracted from his musings by the butler, who informs him that a visitor from the land has arrived. Ludwig is interested in what he says, But the man says that since the gentleman is not feeling well, he will send the guest back. But the prince, ignoring the butler's words, went straight to the guest to see him in person. A man appeared in front of him. He excitedly greets Duke Langell and introduces himself as Antonio Hernando. But in response, Ludwig only ordered the incoming guest to raise his head. As soon as he did, the prince was convinced it wasn't Jay. Pointing the knife at Antonio's throat, the gentleman inquired about his strange attire. Guest says it's a unique costume from his native land. Hernando nervously tells us that the feathers of his costume symbolize a bird that wants to fly free. The man compares himself to her and says he is saddened by the fate of the world. So he has come on a secret mission to help Ludwig with Baron Debbie Briss. Upon hearing the last name, Duke Langell swung his sword violently, taking Antonio's life. Prince angrily says Debbie Briss should have thought 3 times before sending the man to his estate. Ludwig orders his Black Knights to go to Debbie right now and wipe his entire history to dust, leaving no one alive. After Debbie Bryce's house is engulfed in flames, the Duke is again visited by a ghost who says he's the devil's child and doesn't deserve love. At this moment, the butler, Bairn, enters the gentleman's study, saying that a girl from the land named Jay has come to see him. He described her again as a young girl of short stature and wearing strange clothes. Upon hearing that name, Ludwig rushed out of the study and hurried to the guest room. There he saw his Jane, who, as promised, did not leave him alone and came to him. After a long time of waiting and endless amounts of suffering, the couple is reunited again. After cuddling with Ludwig, Jay marveled at how her sweet pup has grown and says she's about to cry. The man at this time can't believe that Jay is now beside him and compares what is happening to a dream. He is so happy to see his pupil that he warmly hugs her once more. Taking a seat in a chair, the girl began a conversation about Ludwig's coming of age. She marvels at how quickly he has grown. Jay thought about one odd thing. It had only been 4 months since she'd broken up with him. But suddenly a certain hunch strikes her, and she asks Ludwig to tell her age. The one replies that he's 27 this year. Yoon-ju is surprised by this, whereupon the man says that the last time he saw her was 10 years ago. Afterward, Ludwig notices the girl's downcast mood and thinks he has said or done something wrong. In fact, Jay was sad because her puppy had been lonely all these 10 years, and there was no way she could have gotten to him sooner. Feeling guilty, she apologizes to Ludwig for having to wait so long for her. But the prince says it's not her fault, and he was only able to survive the loneliness because of her and the memories she gave him. The man reiterates that it's not Jay's fault, and all that matters now is that they will always be together from now on. The girl agrees with him. Ludwig is surprised that it has only been 4 months for the protagonist. She says she couldn't have come sooner. Suddenly, the man realizes that he and his kindergartner are now peers. He wanted to hear Jay confirm his words, but she was too shy to answer because of the obscenely short distance between them. Yoon-ju sits away from Ludwig with lightning speed, after which she is surprised by this coincidence and praises the beauty of the scenery from where she is sitting. The man didn't quite understand her words about the landscape, but he was tormented by another question: how the protagonist had gotten here. As soon as the girl said she came from the side of the mountains, Ludwig became worried, then asked how long she had to walk. When he heard that it took Jay 2 hours to do it, the prince was stunned, because she could have gotten into trouble in that amount of time. Duke urges his friend not to go anywhere alone anymore, because it is very dangerous. Ta agrees with him. Ludwig then introduces Jay to his butler named Joseph, who will help her with everything from now on. The girl watches as the prince orders the butler to prepare a bedroom for her and get busy with dinner for 2. Prince notices Jay's observant look, to which she says she is delighted at how mature her child has become. The Duke gets a blush at her words and waves off that it's no big deal. Joseph, who saw the gentleman smiling for the first time, is surprised at how much he likes the arriving dugout girl. At the same time, Butler thought about the fact that in the future, such a relationship could throw the entire empire into chaos. Walking through Ludwig's palace, Jay is struck by how huge and luxurious it is. The couple enters one of the lavish bedrooms. The prince says this is the protagonist's room from now on. Looking around her chambers, the girl marvels at the insanely high ceilings. Jay notices another bed behind the screen door, to which Ludwig says his room is connected to hers. Mr. expresses his joy at being able to see his girlfriend every day now. Yoonju agrees with him, actually feeling awkward at how close they are. Ludwig presents the girl with her closet where she can store her things. He says to dress warmly because it's cold in his castle. The man shows Jay a pair of shoes and says they will look good on her. It also reminds you that you can ask the butler for help by simply shaking the bell. The girl revels in the prince, who looks like a cute puppy, while Ludwig is surprised that she calls him that, even though he is no longer a little boy. The Duke then offers his friend a change of clothes, to which she agrees. While waiting for the main character in her new look, a man hears her say that she is not happy about something. The one wonders what's wrong. Ludwig is approached by Jay, who is unhappy with a dress that turns out to be too big for her. Seeing the girl in such a clumsy manner, the prince laughed. The latter began to resent that her situation wasn't funny at all. She says it's not her fault that in the world the prince lives in, all people are giants. He promises to find her a smaller outfit. Ludwig doesn't stop laughing, because when Jay is around, he can do it non-stop. He wishes for this moment to last forever. Remembering the presence of the internet, the girl reminds the man about Netflix, where they used to watch shows with Meng Panji. Yoonju says they didn't have time to watch everything because Kay interrupted the monthly installment. But now they can watch as much as they want. The next moment, Jay remembers that she will write to her uncle as soon as she meets Ludwig. But an idea comes to her. She suggests that the gentleman poison her uncle's text message himself. The one accepts her offer. With the encouragement of a friend who told him how to spell a word, Ludwig was able to type and send a message. Jay praised her pup, whereupon a reply came quickly to them. In the message, the uncle says he's glad to know they're okay. He asks the prince to take care of his niece and continue to keep in touch with him. When he sees his uncle's picture, Ludwig is surprised to see him smiling for the first time. The girl agrees that this is astounding. Things that had lost their meaning began to be filled with flavor again, and things that had no odor now fragranced like roses. And it's all thanks to Jay being around Ludwig now. Flopping down on the bed, the girl rejoices at how well she and the Duke have eaten. Suddenly, the protagonist remembers that she brought something to drink and reaches for her bag. The prince wonders what she has brought, to which the girl, trying to get the thing out of the bag, says that it was heavier than she thought. From a small travel bag, Jay pulls out a large, massive box, much to the man's surprise. While arranging many bottles of apple juice, Yeonju says that she heard that apples don't grow in this world, so she brought this with her. Ludwig questions her about how she was able to stock so many bottles, to which she says that her uncle and John helped her. Jay tells how 3 months ago Jean made a scene about how he doesn't want to do the business of squeezing juice out of apples. In response, the girl says he volunteered to help her instead of buying a juicer. Jean complains that he didn't realize there would be so many apples and refuses to work, saying it makes absolutely no sense. In a flash, a gloomy Jay is angry that the boy dared to kick a gift for Ludwig. Toth tried to justify that it was just an accident, but in the end, he couldn't get away with the cheek-curving punishment. After this, Jin, without ceasing to grumble, did the work along with the girl. Ludwig laughed with Gina and expressed his gratitude at such a souvenir. Jay said he would pass his words on to Jean. Watching his girlfriend, Duke has a good feeling that it's like he's back to those happy times when he lived with Yoonju. The man wishes that Jay would always stay by his side like he does now. After drinking apple juice, the gentleman is approached by the butler and informed that it is time to hold a meeting. He agrees, but before he does, Ludwig urges Jay not to go anywhere while he's away. Ta, lighting up her face with a bright smile, says she will easily fulfill his request. Ludwig and the butler started to leave the room, while the girl wondered why the prince was so afraid for her. She assumes it has something to do with where he left so hastily. To the people gathered around the table, the Duke tells them that this morning a visitor from Earth knocked on the doors of their duchy. Ludwig says she has no status, but she is the most noble of all in the empire, so he asks that she be treated with the same respect as he is. But one man in the audience decided to voice his worries that if the emperor found out about it, there would be no disaster. Ludwig threatens the man that he will consider his words to be insubordination, after which he dares not say another word. Joseph, the butler who has been watching the meeting, realizes that the first troubles have already begun. At this time, the Emperor, gazing out of his window into the blizzard, cannot understand what Ludwig is thinking, committing such acts. While in his room, Duke Landgale scrolls through the pleasantries with his friend as she tried on a dress, dined with him, and drank juice. These memories with a joyful Jane make him smile for no reason. Ludwig felt like visiting her, so he was about to open the door to her bedroom. But suddenly he was overcome with doubts as to whether he could enter her or not. The man recalls how he always slept next to Jay when he was little, which is hardly an option now. The prince decides to put such thoughts out of his mind, for he will only enter her room to say hello. Ludwig opened the door and asked if he could go inside, but no answer was heard. As it turns out, Jay's asleep. She sprawled sweetly on the bed like a sleeping beauty. The man, mesmerized by her beauty, approached and bent down to her face. He wanted to say some important words, but he didn't have time. At this point, the girl woke up and nonchalantly asked Ludwig what he was doing. The prince is startled by this suddenness. He anxiously apologizes to his friend and says that she misunderstood everything. Jay says he has nothing to apologize for and wonders about what he wanted to say to her. But Ludwig says that's not the case and storms out of the room, wishing Yeonju a good night. The man buried his face in his pillow in shame, not realizing why the hell he'd even come into her room in the first place. Prince Aloud tells himself to calm down as Jay suddenly appears beside him and asks why he needs to calm down. The man is startled and falls off the bed, nervously wondering to the girl why she is awake. She says he's acting weird. Yeonju is concerned about his behavior, and she wonders if he's hiding something from her. Suddenly, the girl suggests that he sleep together, holding hands to calm his excitement. Calling Ludwig his sweet puppy, Jay snuggles up with him on his bed and wishes him sweet dreams. The man falls asleep with her. He has a strange feeling, the essence of which he cannot understand. In his thoughts, he also wishes the girl a good night. The raging downpour outside the window did not distract the young, long-haired man from the thoughts he was pondering as he looked at his sword. He recalls the recent meeting of Ludwig, who said that henceforth the guest from Earth had the same power as he. The man thinks that the protagonist must be very striking for the Duke of Landgale to say such words about her. Joseph, the butler, enters the room and asks if he's busy. The long-haired man replies that yes, he does. The butler then informs the man that the Duke has given him orders to accompany the guest. He didn't understand the butler's words the first time, so he asked him to repeat them. Joseph explains that he is now the one responsible for the safety of the guest from Earth, Mrs. J. The long-haired man is surprised by this news because he has always killed and tortured people, not escorted them. Lastly, the butler says that the Duke trusts him, so he assigned him to the case. The pay for such a job will be 20,000. The latter is surprised at the large amount of salary the Duke is offering for guarding his guest. The long-haired man sighs at having to accompany the main character, even though he's uncomfortable with women. Meanwhile, Ludwig wakes up abruptly because he thinks he overslept, but he notices Jay sleeping next to him, after which he realizes that this is the first time he's been able to fall asleep so easily. Ever since he'd broken up with her, he'd had nightmares every night. But now, with her return, even the ghost of his mother that had tormented him during the day no longer appeared. Following the man, the girl also wakes up. She asks Ludwig if he's okay. He says it's okay. The couple sweetly exchange good morning wishes. However, remembering what time it is, Ludwig rises from the bed in a hurry. The girl stops him and tells him he forgot to bring his sword. Prince picks it up and thanks Jay. The man then apologizes to his girlfriend that they won't be able to have breakfast together and suggests that they have dinner together. Jay happily agrees to his proposal and says he has nothing to worry about. Ludwig thanks the protagonist for her understanding and leaves with the butler to go about his business. Glancing in the wake of the departing Duke, Jay catches the embarrassment of her and him looking too much like newlyweds. She shakes her head from those thoughts. The girl is approached by a servant, whose appearance the girl is very frightened. The servant says that Yeonju gets along well with the master as newlyweds. Jay wonders since when the girl has been standing by her, to which she is surprised to hear Ludwig say that he regrets not being able to have breakfast with a guest. Judging from this, the girl realizes that the servant has been standing there for a long time. A servant informs her that her master has asked her to inspect the castle today. For this purpose, she had prepared warm clothes for her guest. Examining the coat, Jay says it looks very warm. The maid asks her to give her a sign when she is ready. Upon seeing the guest from the ground in her luxurious new look, the servant showered her with compliments and words about how she looked like the Duke's bride. Suddenly, two men approach Jay, introduce themselves as Roberto and Michael, and tell her that they will be accompanying her today. The girl is surprised at their words and says she is able to walk herself. The men say it's an order from the Duke, which leads the protagonist to be even more surprised. All this time, a long-haired man was secretly watching them. Time travels back in time, where Jay walks down the castle hallway at night, looking for the bathroom. But suddenly she freezes, noticing a strange, scary human shadow on the floor. The girl realizes that it's not her who casts this shadow, which scares her a lot. But she decides to pull herself together. Gaining his courage, Jay turns around sharply to see the shadow's owner. But her expectations were cut short when there was no one behind her. Yoonju decides that she's just dreaming. As if nothing had happened, the girl continues on her way to the bathroom. Suddenly, in the mirror that hangs in the hallway, appears a humanoid image, which clearly does not have the best intentions. The whole shadow situation was recounted by Jay to Duchess Susan over a cup of tea. The Duchess believes that all these oddities are due to the old age of the palace, because it was built thousands of years ago. She then suggests that it might be a ghost because she's heard rumors about it. Jay is alarmed by such words and asks the woman to tell her more about it. Susan tells of a rumor that the castle is haunted by an evil spirit who appears to people as a shadow. He enters the shadow of a person. Through it, he enters the body and uses it as his own shell, after which he disappears. After using one body, he escapes and wanders off again to find another host. The Duchess warns that if encountering a ghost at night, it is strictly forbidden to make eye contact with it. Mrs. Susan J. recalled this whole story as she looked at Roberto and Michael, who had volunteered to accompany her. The girl then asks the men if there are any other attendants in the castle besides them. Michael replies that they are the best of knights and no one can compare to them. He assumes the protagonist isn't comfortable with them, but says they know every corner in the castle. Also, the knight says that everyone here knows them, so they were the ones ordered to escort the guest from the land. Jay reluctantly agrees with him. Roberto decided to defuse the situation and take away his buddy's seriousness. He apologizes to the lady for not being gracious to Michael. However, Roberto cheerfully states that if Jay finds herself in danger, she can always call them for help. Yoonju thanks the man for his support, but says she can overcome things on her own. The one is mortified by her courage. After a while, Jay and her guards came to the castle's greenhouse. She marvels at her beauty. She also praises the fragrance that is in the air thanks to the hundreds of flowers that grow there. Suddenly, Roberto asks the girl to pay attention to him. He wonders if the flower behind his ear suits him. The main character says he looks just fine, while Michael thinks his friend is cheesy. Roberto then clips a flower to the girl's hair as well. Ta thanks him for such a favor. All this time, however, the men and Jay were being watched by some stranger. An indeterminate amount of time passes. The protagonist, clinging a blindfold on her head, makes the decision that she herself will defeat the shadowy ghost. With Ludwig working hard, Jay feels the need to make his castle safer. The girl is filled with fighting spirit and, calling herself a ghost hunter, heroically promises to protect the Duke and his palace. From research, she learned that shadow ghosts favor dark places the most. Based on this, the girl hides behind the curtain, in full confidence that the salt she brought with her will scare the ghost away. Suddenly, Jay immediately notices the very same shadow that she had already seen a while ago. Realizing that the shadowy ghost has already appeared to her, the girl immediately decides to execute her plan to capture him. She hurls the bowl of salt directly at the source of the shadow, chasing the ghost away and calling it a nasty creature. But instead of the evil, foul thing in front of Jay, it was Mr. Gray, who had been assigned by the Duke to guard her. He, sprinkled with salt, asks the girl what she's doing here. The protagonist could not find words from such an unexpected turn of events. At that moment, Ludwig bursts into the room with Michael and Roberto, disturbed by the noise. But instead of something horrible, they see Mr. Gray and Jay, who has her head bashfully lowered in front of him. When asked by the Duke what happened, Gray suggests that the lady mistook him for a ghost. Ludwig asks if something terrible has happened to them, to which he replies in the negative. The master is glad to hear that all is well. Then the prince notices Jay with a strange expression on his face, who has covered her face with his cloak out of shame. He is surprised at her behavior. The girl, on the other hand, makes the excuse that she didn't know she was hunting a man all along. Gray, watching the Duke, who then promises to explain everything to his girlfriend, finds his behavior slightly unnerving. Suddenly, a girl with snow-white hair appears out of nowhere and attacks the knight with a sword. Toth manages to defend against a punch. Mr. Gray realizes that the power emanating from the girl is familiar to him, whereupon he recognizes the stranger as Cassandra. Putting her sword aside, Cassandra is surprised that she thought all along that only northern knights lived in the castle. However, she didn't expect to see a girl shaking from behind a ghost here as well. Now she understood why they were like an eyesore to the Emperor. Jay grumbles that she wasn't scared of anyone at all, while Cassandra says she's come to retrieve a stranger named Jay on the Emperor's orders. Ludwig doesn't like this kind of news. He clarifies who is there to pick up her friend. Meanwhile, the protagonist, who has not yet had time to recover from the surprise with the ghost, does not understand what is happening at all. The time is moved back a few days. The Emperor, among his friends, is discussing some topics. One blue-eyed girl asks if anyone has heard the rumors that everyone is already talking about. The red-haired lady asks the one if she means Duke Landgale's guest who came from the land. The white-haired man says he heard that this foreign woman is Ludwig's fiancée. Hearing such gossip, the Emperor asks his buddies to tell more about the main character. One of the girls says that the Emperor has been busy with affairs of state lately, so he probably hasn't heard from her yet. The girl explains that they are now discussing a foreign girl who recently visited the Duke's castle in the north, and who is rumored to be Ludwig's future wife. The Emperor thinks that Duke Landgale's scheme is too foolish, for he has already recommended a princess to him for marriage. Realizing that his plan may fail, His Majesty decides to get rid of the foreigner and set Ludwig up with the princess. Thinking about how this could be done, he suddenly remembered meeting Princess Ceres' rank, one from the Juno East region. The Emperor greeted the princess cheerfully and wanted to inquire how she was doing. But Ceres interrupts him and says worriedly that she cannot marry Duke Landgale, for she has no rights to do so. But the man reassures the princess, saying that if her worries are because of rumors about her fiancé, she has no need to worry. The Emperor says that everything will be fine as he promised, because the marriage is also needed for Ludwig's younger brother. Ceres, who has realized that what's going on isn't because of rumors, says that she, even as an unmarried woman, can live well on her own. Suddenly, the princess hears words that are quite shocking to her. The Emperor thinks that she cannot live alone. He reminds her that she is going to rebuild the eastern province, but if she lives alone, everyone will think of her as an exiled princess. Rumors of this would reach her family members in shame. The depressed girl has no choice but to agree with the Emperor. He advises her to think hard about what he said. His Majesty once again sets his sights on getting rid of the protagonist until his plan cannot be realized. The Emperor comes out of his memories and walks away from his friends, saying he had urgent business to attend to. He meets Cassandra on his way, who flirtatiously embraces him and asks him if he missed her. The man asks to get his dirty hands off of him. The girl complains about how unattractive he is. His Majesty orders Cassandra to bring to him a stranger from the land who has come to see Ludwig. The woman was interested in what he said. However, the Emperor says that the guest from Earth must come uninjured, or his plans will be jeopardized. Reminded that they are honorable enemies of Landgale, the girl asks permission to at least scratch Ludwig's friend. The Emperor flatly forbids her to do so and tells her that she should just bring her to him. Cassandra reluctantly agrees. Time reverts back to the moment Cassandra burst into the Duke's castle. She doesn't think they can handle her, and whatever the Emperor has in mind there, they'll have fun. The silence between the Landgale brothers and the visitor from Earth made Cassandra feel bored, making her want to leave as soon as possible. But the girl deftly grabs Jay and says she'll bring the girl with her before she leaves. The main character slaps Cassandra across the face and tells her that she's not going anywhere, and that if the Emperor has business with her, let her come herself. Suddenly, complaints were heard from the small walkie-talkie in the kidnapper's ear about the racket they were making out there. Ludwig, taking advantage of the girl's distraction, threw his sword in her direction. Formidably keeping his eyes on the offending party, the Duke promises to kill her if she ever moves. Cassandra complains that Ludwig has no manners because he left a big scratch on her beautiful face. Jay also decided not to miss the chance and gave her kidnapper a shoulder strike to the chin. Seizing the moment, Ludwig attacks Cassandra with a huge spear. Jay pulls out of her grasp. The girl didn't expect Duke Landgale to launch such an attack. She doubts that the man is even sane. Mr. Gray, who is protecting Jay, orders her not to move because the magic of the lightning attribute is about to appear. The kidnapper decides to use her lightning magic to get what she wants. Ludwig thinks she lives up to her name, Cassandra. Ludwig takes a punch to the face that leaves him disoriented for a few seconds. Mr. Gray takes a hard hit as well. Unfortunately, he lets Jay out of his grasp. Cassandra manages to take Jay away from them. Before she leaves, she says she almost died from the noise the men made. Duke Landgale, watching his favorite friend being kidnapped, desperately screams her name. But his severe injuries prevent him from following Cassandra. The man, gritting his teeth, promises that he won't leave the Emperor alone for a second.